and welcome to episode 12 of the Nostalgia Bubble podcast, the show where two lifelong best friends celebrate the movies that they love. I'm one of your hosts, Shuggy, an amateur film reviewer and nerd.
And I am Nye, a Christmas enthusiast.
Yeah, you made that very clear last week.
Yep.
And you got to pick
topical.
a Christmas movie this week.
I did, yes. And for this one I chose The Grinch, or How the Grinch Stole Christmas, the 2000 film.
Jim Carrey.
Yes. This was one, I was interested to hear what you thought of this, because it's one that you have openly expressed distaste for.
I'm not a fan.
Still not a fan?
Still not a fan.
Okay, well, I'm sure this discussion will be interesting then.
Yeah.
I think this is probably the first film that we've done of this season where we've got to this point, having seen the films and come to discuss it, where one of the two of us has kind of said they don't like it.
Probably, yeah. And that's fine. There are things I like about the film, and I will be quick to sing the praises of those things.
Okay, so we will focus on those as our main touch points,
Yeah.
and then we could discuss what could have been improved about the film.
Yeah. Well, I'll kick us straight off with some pre-production here.
Yep.
Because the first thing I have to say about this is kind of my major issue with the film. So,
Okay.
obviously this is an adaptation of a Dr. Seuss book. And the Dr. Seuss book is a 69-page picture book. There's not a lot of depth or story there.
Yeah.
And that's kind of my issue, is everything they add on.
Okay. So you think they've fleshed it out too much?
I think they fleshed it out badly.
Okay. So lack of quantity, not quality. No, wrong
Other way around.
Lack of quality, not quantity.
Yeah. So
Okay.
this also isn't the first adaptation of The Grinch, nor the last. There was a 25-minute TV special animated in like the 60s with Boris Karloff voicing the Grinch, and that's one that's got a lot of acclaim.
Yeah.
And that pretty much just adapts the material from the book. There is an even worse version of the Grinch from 2018, which is an Illumination film. Who, if you know, they're the studio who make the Despicable Me franchise.
Yeah. Well, I know about this film. It's not one that I've made the effort to watch.
It's not great. Like, the problem I have with Illumination films is that you get like a Disney film or a Pixar film, and they make animated films that, you know, they are for kids can go and enjoy, but there is enough there for adults. There is substantial storytelling, you know, meaningful character arcs, stuff like that, you know. Illumination films don't have those. They pretty much just focus on making a film for kids.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's very much the problem with the second Grinch, or the third Grinch.
Right.
So, now we talk about
carry
this
on.
film.
Yes.
So Dr. Seuss had originally refused to sell rights to his books, like film rights. He was very protective about those.
Mm-hmm.
But after he died, his widow sort of agreed several merchandising deals. And in 1998, she auctioned the rights to the Grinch to whoever had the best pitch whilst meeting some of her conditions.
Right.
Her conditions were $5 million up front, 4% of box office takings, 50% of any merchandise takings, 70% from book tie-ins, and an actor of high kind of stature renowned to play the Grinch.
Okay, so not much.
Well, there's a lot of financial stuff, but like only one thing in terms of the, you know, constrictions on the film.
Yeah.
So there were a few proposals. Firstly, 20th Century Fox pitched a film with Jack Nicholson playing the character.
Okay. I can only see him as kind of like channeling the Joker. That's the only kind of interpretation of the Grinch that I can imagine off the top of my head from Jack Nicholson.
I would love to see a Jack Nicholson Grinch.
Yeah, I think it would be pretty interesting.
Yeah, 100%. So there were a couple of other directors who kind of pitched stuff. So the Farrelly brothers, who I think they did a lot of stuff with Jim Carrey. They might have done Dumb and Dumber. I forgot to look into it. And John Hughes, who obviously made a lot of the kind of 80s coming-of-age films, Breakfast Club and Ferris Bueller and the like. And then Universal, who ended up winning, but they originally had a pitch with someone called Brian Glazer, and that was refused as well. And that's when Brian Glazer enlisted Ron Howard to kind of help with the negotiations.
Right.
So Ron Howard was developing an adaptation of a different book called The Sea Wolf, but Glazer kind of convinced him to help with the pitch. And while Howard was reading the book, he kind of became really interested in Cindy Lou Who. So his extended pitch of, Cindy Lou's story and all the Whoville stuff is what won. So I think we have to talk about, there was a big issue in production, which was with the Grinch suit. So it was designed by the special effects artist, and it was basically a spandex suit with green yak hair sewed onto it. And it took about 8.5 hours a day for Jim Carrey to get put into this.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah,
That's pretty trawling.
He didn't take it well.
Yeah, I've actually heard some pretty horrific stories about Jim Carrey, specifically on the set of this film.
So apparently, during that, he at one point kicked a hole in a wall.
Yeah.
Was apparently just, quote, really mean to everybody. And he would often just, disappear during filming. And he'd come back and the costume was all ripped up.
Gosh. I mean, yeah, so somebody I was working with on a show who did the kind of hair, makeup and costume stuff, or hair and makeup, knew personally somebody that worked on The Grinch.
Oh, right.
And they had a really terrible experience with Jim Carrey on this film, to the point where he actually had to end up going and having therapy. But yeah, so this is just what I've heard, is that there was some pretty damaging relationships being formed on Jim Carrey's part on the set of this film.
Yeah, there was some people quit the production and they had to basically talk Jim Carrey into not acting like this.
Why do you think that was? Was this because obviously Jim Carrey is somebody who's kind of well known for kind of method acting or kind of really immersing himself in the characters that he's portraying, but this doesn't feel like that, obviously The Grinch was awful, but it feels more like Jim Carrey rather than The Grinch.
Yeah, this feels like someone who's one of the biggest stars in the world having a bit of a power trip and angry at the fact he has to sit for 8.5 hour days to get in costume.
Okay, so that was kind of the place it was coming from then.
That's what it feels like to me.
Yeah.
So eventually, the head of the special effects and Ron Howard had to have a conversation with him and get him essentially to stop acting like this. And apparently he did eventually manage to remain calm for the rest of the production.
So you kind of mentioned that this is sort of when Jim Carrey was one of the biggest actors going.
So for 1994, Jim Carrey had one of those just magical years where he had 3 massive hits in Dumb and Dumber, Ace Ventura, and The Mask.
Yeah.
And so by this point,
in which, I mean, The Mask particularly, he was incredible.
I know you love that one.
Yeah, I'm not entirely a huge Jim Carrey fan. There are some films I like and some films I'm not too keen on, but The Mask specifically, I thought he was brilliant in.
So yeah, this was 6 years later, and he'd been riding high on this, wave. He'd been in major comedies a lot since then. I don't know if he'd sort of started branching out into more serious dramatic roles, but that's where I much prefer Jim Carrey. I am not a fan of Jim Carrey as a comedian. I don't like any of the 3 films I mentioned. I don't like his comedy shtick. It's just not for me.
Yeah, it's very stylized, and therefore is going to be very specific in taste.
Yeah, and that's my thing with The Grinch is his performance in this is very much similar to his performance in The Mask or in Ace Ventura, and it's just not something I can
see
like.
that. I can see that parallel for sure.
Yeah.
Just picking up on your point about his more dramatic films, a personal favourite of mine is The Truman Show.
Yeah,
where you get to see some sort of real solid acting from him.
the one for me is Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. He's utterly phenomenal in that.
I know he's had some. He's also had some kind of difficulty becoming too engrossed in the characters that he's created, and they've caused some existential problems for him.
Yeah, yeah. I can't remember which one it is, but yeah, he played one of like the he played Charlie Kaufman, and he went
Yeah,
slightly off the rails with that.
yeah, yeah. I think all part of the dramatic Jim Carrey.
Yeah, and we've had some discussions on method acting before, and I am not a fan at all.
Yeah, me neither. I think it's like as an actor, it seems like a very grey area where the kind of the basis of acting is that you're simply pretending, is the kind of the foundation theory of it, and you can pretend using your imagination in different ways, but there's a kind of question around method acting because it sort of begs whether are you actually pretending if you're immersed to the point where you're truly experiencing it. So if you look at somebody like Heath Ledger, for example, playing the Joker, who that's a classic example of method acting, whereby he did almost drive himself insane and get hooked on drugs and
He
all
led to his own
sorts.
death.
Yeah, one could argue that what you see on screen is actually not acting in the sense that it's pretending, and that he's actually experiencing and genuinely kind of portraying this real insanity.
I mean, my
And
problem is more it's an excuse for these people to act like terrible people offset, and they say, oh, it's just for the character. And you look at Jim Carrey in some of these films, and
yeah,
Jared Leto.
yeah, I mean, Jared Leto is another name who you kind of hear thrown around a lot, and is associated with being a bit of a difficult person, to put it nicely.
Yeah, it's always the method actors. And there was a great joke that went around on the internet, which is you only hear people method acting as terrible people. You never hear people method acting
Yeah,
as like the nicest people. Although
yeah,
someone did suggest that maybe Tom Hanks has been method acting to prepare for the role of Mr. Rogers for his entire life.
possibly. Yeah.
Right, should we start? Should we start talking about the Grinch?
Yes, yes. Let's talk about the Grinch. So you weren't too keen on it, but there are things you do like about it.
Yeah.
Why don't we start there?
Well, yeah. Right off the bat, you have Whoville is introduced straight away, and the production design to make this look like something Dr. Seussian is outstanding. Like, the same with the Grinch's Cave. Like, the production design there is amazing. I love what they did to create these two kind of key locations, and I think both
Yeah.
just completely capture, the feelings that they're meant to evoke.
Yeah, so for me, the reason I love The Grinch is not necessarily because I think it's a top quality film. It's because when I want to get into the Christmas spirit, Whoville does that for me. And it's partially because of the design. I love the kind of cartoony nature of like the shoes, the cars, the clothes, the tree in the middle, the buildings, all of that stuff. For me, it kind of like encapsulates what I picture as being Christmas as a kid, especially like this sort of very naive idea of what Christmas looks like.
Okay.
Similarly to the way that it did in Christmas Land in Night Before Christmas. So I think, for me, I guess having that in sort of a live action sort of picture, it for me just really gets me into the Christmas spirit. It's like the embodiment of Christmas.
Okay, see, for me, the embodiment for Christmas is solely food. I don't care about the rest of Christmas. I only care about the
Yeah.
dinner.
Okay. yeah, so for me, I care about the kind of, I like the general atmosphere, and I like being with family and all of that, which ultimately is what the Grinch, the film, ends up kind of underpinning as his message.
Yeah, yeah, and it never hit as hard with me because obviously I'm more of a Halloween guy, which is hang out with friends and have a big party
Yeah,
rather than
yeah,
the smaller scale family stuff.
yeah.
Um, I never realised till this watch, the narrator's Anthony Hopkins.
I didn't know this until you just said it. So,
Yeah, yeah. Because obviously I looked at the cast list and I'm like, that's Anthony Hopkins, and then I was listening to the narration. I'm like, oh, that is really Anthony Hopkins,
yeah.
which is
And
wild.
it's very different to things I've seen him in. Um, Obviously, when you put that next to the likes of
Hannibal Lecter.
Hannibal Lecter, um, but that's, yeah, I didn't know that. That's a nice little
Yeah, yeah.
nugget of
And I
information.
mean, he's just got a great voice. It's like for him to basically be the Doctor Zeus of this film is
Yeah,
awesome bit of casting, and I love his narration.
I mean, he is Anthony Hopkins is, for me, nothing short of a genius actor.
Yeah,
Um, I I mean, he knows how to do this stuff inside out. He's built habits and he's built his techniques and he knows exactly what he's doing. And you can watch anything he's in really, especially kind of as he gets older. Like obviously he's been brilliant since he was younger, but his older stuff you kind of see it happen more naturally. And I mean, I'm talking about like yes, Silence of the Lambs, even things like
yeah.
Westworld, like he he knows how to use language,
And I mean,
and
I think that's such an important point because the narrator part of this, that's the Doctor Zeus language. That's where
yeah,
those, the lyrical, poetic stuff, that Doctor Zeus wrote. That's where it is in the film. It's in the narration.
yeah. I mean, this is what gives Doctor Zeus its identity
Yeah, and that's why
ultimately.
I mentioned all the other stuff that's built around it. It's the narration is almost, I don't know if it's word for word what came out of the Grinch book, but a lot of it is, and
Yeah,
that's the stuff that I love. The Doctor Zeus is just poetic voice is incredible, and that's what I love as a kid. My favorite Doctor Zeus books growing up were The Cat in the Hat, Green Eggs and Ham, stuff like that, and they are just
yeah,
similarly filled with this wonderful language. And who better to do that than Anthony Hopkins, who just has this wonderful voice and, as you say, an incredible acting talent, that he has this presence and this way with language that he makes this role so powerful in the film.
yeah. I mean, this is kind of like the through line of the whole film, um, and I think he's. You kind of see moments of it when obviously the Grinch is talking in rhyme and trying not to and stuff like that. And
Yeah,
I think, um, but for me, like this kind of gives the film its sort of framework, and not just the actual writing itself, and not just the poetry, but the kind of the way that it's used in the film, the way that it's kind of interjected. It feels as though that is almost like a picture frame and the film fits within it.
that's a great analogy. I love
Thank you.
that. I really want to shout out, like, it took them 8.5 hours a day, but that Grinch costume does look great.
Yeah, I mean, he definitely pulls it off. I do think the one thing that I can absolutely commend Jim Carrey for is his physical energy.
Oh no, yeah, 100%. Like, I'm not
And
saying it's a bad performance he gives. It's the thing that, like, people love about this film. It's
yeah,
just I am not a fan of his comedy. I don't think it's a bad
absolutely.
performance.
Yeah.
It's just not one I enjoy.
Yeah, and that's understandable. I mean, like I said, it's very kind of niche in its style, but I think kind of just referring back to the suit, his physical comedy complements the suit so well.
That's a good point. Yeah.
And I think that, like, yes, the suit, it looks brilliant, but it serves its purpose in tandem with the way that Jim Carrey uses it.
Yeah, that's fair.
And but yes, I think it's become iconic as well. I mean, and I really like the kind of similarity that it has to the makeup and the costumes of the Who people.
Okay, now the makeup and the costumes of the Who people, the makeup specifically. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying it's nightmare fuel.
It is.
I
It's
think
weird,
it's
isn't
horrific.
it?
I hate it.
It is a bit scary. That kind of like extended top lip up to the tip of the nose, but it's iconic. Like you.
It always off put me of the film growing up.
Oh yeah, no. It's for me. I kind of get a similar when I look at it. I get a similar feeling that I got when I looked at the Oompa Loompas in Charlie,
See,
or in Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory.
yeah, no, I don't know what it is about it for me, but it always like off put me as a kid. And this
Yeah.
always feels like Christmas. I'm like, this always feels like nightmares waiting to happen.
I thought Halloween was your favorite holiday anyway.
Yeah, I don't get scared at many Halloween films. I will admit.
But the Grinch, however,
It's just, yeah, it's the fact that it's so nearly human and yet just a little bit off
yeah,
in such an unnatural way. Like it doesn't look right.
yeah, I can see that. I understand where you're coming from.
It doesn't look like
And-
anything that exists on this earth.
Yeah, you're not wrong. But maybe that's why I enjoy like everything else about the film
Fair enough.
so much.
But then I think the Grinch looks great, and I love it. I love that outfit.
Yeah, I think, but the Grinch is meant to seem weird and odd and alien
But he's
other.
he's the one who looks more normal to me.
I wonder why.
Yeah, hard to say.
Maybe that kind of makeup in the context of the Grinch, like the idea that he's still got that kind of top lip that merges into his nose, that looks more normal when you surround it by green yak hair.
Yeah, it just
And-
works better in that whole outfit rather than just that bit of prosthetic.
Yeah. But I actually think it's an important detail though, you know, like it's this idea that he is one of them. He does look like them, but he's just a bit different.
Yeah.
And the idea that like it's kind of like because I think that kind of top lip is the Who's defining feature without a doubt. And he shares that with them. He has that kind of definite similarity, and it's everything else that the Who's decide to kind of pick up on from the point where he was a child.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think it's kind of an important point, the fact that it exists. I think they had to give them, especially for kids, like they had to give them something visual that was kind of quite obvious.
Yeah, something that tied the Grinch to them. You know, he is,
Yeah.
you know, someone in this version of the story. He is someone who has come from Whoville. You know, he was, you know, born and brought up there in the way that the weird Whoville babies are born.
Yeah. Dropped off in umbrellas.
Yeah, and he
Yeah.
was brought up there and then ran away when he was, you know, a kid.
Yeah. Brought up by two women
Yeah.
progressively.
Yeah.
Well, not in 2000 mainstream kids film. You could argue that was progressive at the time.
Probably was pretty progressive at the time. Probably would be pretty
Yeah.
progressive for now, to be honest. We're not.
In a kids
not
film,
great.
yeah. Yeah, for sure. So I appreciated that as well.
Yeah, same for sure.
Yeah.
Weirdly, we've talked about those prosthetics on the Who's. I don't think Cindy Lou Who has any prosthetics at all, and she just looks like a normal human being.
Well, I mean, at the beginning, or when there's when they talk about the Grinch, they talk about him not having grown into his nose yet
Oh, okay. I
as a
might have
kid, when
missed
he's
that.
a kid. So it seems like um, it's something that they kind of grow into.
Oh,
But
okay.
she does have a like a whiff of the upturned
All
nose.
right. Okay. I just maybe didn't pick up on it.
Um, but uh, I think if I'm remembering it correctly, um, but having like looking at the poster or the photo of the Grinch facing Cindy Lou, no, I don't think she does have the prosthetic on.
No, no, no. There's nothing.
So just the a perfectly shaped face
Yeah.
for a pre-merged lip who.
Well,
Um,
let's talk about her as a character because she's the one that Ron Howard was sort of really fascinated about, and like
yeah,
she's the reason that he decided to make this film and won the pitch battle.
yeah. Um, I think she's kind of pretty pure.
She's the
I
one
think
who kind of embodies your idea of Christmas about like this kind of. It's about the atmosphere and the family, and it's not about the materialistic side.
yeah. I think she sort of depicts the kind of post-capitalist idea of what Christmas should be
Yeah, like
about.
the ideal of Christmas you always see in Christmas movies.
Yeah. And I mean, it's funny because there seems to be such an absence of that around Whoville. From the get-go, she so kind of clearly disregards the sort of the presents
Yeah, she's just
and
from the off. She is not, ecstatic about it being Christmas time at all, and everyone else is, very hyped up, and she's just a bit tired with it all. She has a song. It was a random song out of nowhere. One of like two in the
yeah.
film.
Where are you, Christmas? That one.
Yeah, I don't know why there was a song.
Felt a little out of place, but she was out of place.
Yeah.
She, I think, it kind of made her seem like this little angel. While we're on the topic, "You're a Mean One, Mr. Grinch."
Banger.
Absolute tune.
Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah.
It
Top
is.
quality Christmas song that.
It's undeniably my favorite, like one of my favorite parts of the film.
Yeah, I agree.
It's it's a very good song. Um, and yeah, I mean, "Where Are You, Christmas" pales in comparison, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I
Um,
forgot Where Are You Christmas was in the film, and
yeah,
when watching it, I was like, really? I don't remember there being many songs in this, and this is not
yeah,
good. But yeah, you're a mean one, Mr. Grinch. I remember that, and I remember
yeah,
that's one
for
of the
sure.
bits I definitely like.
Yeah. But yeah, going back to Cindy Lou, I think, I mean, she's obviously meant to embody everything that the Grinch is not.
Yeah, and so I think this is kind of where I start having issues with the film. So you look at the original kids book, and it's very much the Grinch obviously doesn't understand Christmas. He thinks that stealing all this material stuff will kill what Christmas is. And I, as someone who only cares about the food, I think he's right. Because they steal is it the roast beast?
Yeah,
Yeah. And it's the whole town just comes together to accept that that's not the case. They are a Christmas town, but none of them are driven by the materialistic side. Whereas this film adds, oh no, the whole town are basically the Grinch, apart from this one little girl.
yeah. I think you can. The Grinch seems to be, which you kind of discover as the film goes on, is very much a product of the town.
Yeah, and I don't know how well that works for me. It just makes the rest of the town very unlikable, and most of them don't really get redeemed. Like the dad gets redeemed, and the neighbor gets redeemed, and that's about it.
Yeah, I like the dad.
The dad's good. I love the dad, and I'm sure we'll come on to the end. But that his kind of scene, the scene where he stands up for Cindy,
Yeah,
that's my favorite. That's my other favorite scene in the film. Like along with
yeah.
the "You're a mean one, Mr. Grinch."
It's an interesting point that the other characters don't really get redeemed, and it feels as though the whole kind of almost like the punchline of the film, the whole message behind the film lies squarely on Cindy Lou,
Yeah.
rather than there just being, because you kind of have some minor backstories and some, like, you've got kind of like the relationship between the mayor and Martha May, and that's kind of it, really.
Yeah.
And obviously Martha May and the Grinch, and like, but
Honestly,
there
none
aren't
of that
many.
works for me.
Yeah, there aren't many peripheral kind of storylines going on.
Yeah, if you're gonna add all these characters, give them something to do beyond just the
Yeah,
mayor's a bad dude, and like Martha May is so unlikable during the film for me. It's like the Grinch is only attracted to her because she is attractive. Like there's nothing about her personality. She's pretty
yeah,
vacant and empty.
yeah. I mean, she hasn't got much depth as a character.
Like
Um,
the most notable thing about her in kind of the present day timeline of the film is that she owns a Christmas light machine gun.
yeah, true. Um, yeah, I think I see your point that like the film is maybe too kind of Grinch and Cindy Lou centric.
But it's the fact that they add all the other stuff around there. It's like either don't add it or do something with it. Like they half-assed it essentially. They put it in
Yeah,
without doing anything substantial with it.
yeah, I see your point.
There are a couple of great jokes in there. I do love the Grinch when he's pondering his schedule. Like that's one of the great bits in the
Yeah,
like
yeah.
um
There is some truth in that schedule, I tell you.
yeah, that one hits home a little.
Yeah, I definitely relate with that a lot more now than I did as a kid.
Yeah, like that's the kind of joke I love. And when they have the holiday cheermeister celebration, the sack race, which is a riff on Chariots of Fire, I did
Yeah,
enjoy that. And he's just there bulldozing these children out the
yeah.
way.
I did realise as well, I think in Bruce Almighty there's a scene where he's running to Chariots of Fire in slow motion as well.
Okay,
So,
they may be overusing the Jim Carrey Chariots of Fire
yeah,
in
yeah,
a situation you wouldn't expect.
yeah.
Gag.
I did like the Cheermeister celebration scene. Him bouncing around on the chair, trying not to throw up.
Whereas he's just being
Um,
fed more and more food between
yeah.
chair sessions.
No wonder you like that scene. That's where it's all about the food.
Yeah, yeah. I'm telling you, like Christmas, it's all about the food.
The one thing I did get slightly confused by is when he's kind of like quietly infiltrating the town with his kind of Jedi Knight cloak
Yeah.
and his mask. Nobody recognizes him from his hands.
I had the same thought, and then I was like, I can't think about this, or I will lose my mind at it.
Yeah, I think at the beginning of the film, the way you see Cindy Lou's brothers kind of up at the Grinch's house, it seems like a lot of them actually have never seen him before. He's like this kind of mythical creature
Yeah,
to a lot of them.
I guess to the younger people, yeah.
Yeah, which fits in well as he kind of pretends to be Santa later on in the film.
Mm.
I do want to give a massive shout out to Max, the dog.
He's a good boy.
He is the goodest boy.
Yeah, he's not as good a boy as the ghost dog from Nightmare Before Christmas.
Okay, I might agree to disagree with you on that one.
Okay.
I mean, we've had this conversation. I'm a huge dog fan.
Yeah, yeah.
Anything with a dog in it, the dog could be chewing someone's arm off, and as far as I'm concerned, they would be a good dog. So, yeah, I was super fond of Max. Max actually had talked some sense into the Grinch. It was almost like the Grinch's sort of conscience that just sat on his shoulder through the film.
Now you probably spend you have a cat and you had a dog for a little bit, but I obviously spend a lot of time with my cat. You do
Yeah.
just talk to your cat or pet as though it talks back. That is the thing I do.
Yeah, It is a thing. You introduce them as a genuine member of the family, and then you are clinically insane from there on
Yeah,
in.
yeah. It's when you're alone with your pet and you're just having full conversations that are what
Yeah,
completely one-sided, but you think that they're the other side is happening, and that is very
yeah,
much what's happening with the Grinch.
yeah. And it's quite endearing. And I think if you take it like that, if you kind of see it in that way, where you kind of go, right, well, Max isn't actually communicating with the Grinch, and it is just that it's his conscience, and he's trying to kind of battle this out. There is this part of him, this part of the Grinch that is inherently good.
Yeah,
You see him as a kid, and he was a difficult child, but I mean, he went through the trouble of making a Christmas present for Martha May.
I think I've
And
realised why you like this film. A
why?
difficult child who tries to get in the Christmas spirit and finally does. Does it hit home for you,
Yes.
Nye?
Oh God, throwback. um, yeah, I could just relate to it, and Harry as well.
We
I'm
can both
Greek,
relate to that.
so. um, so yeah, there is something in him that is good and wants to be good,
Yeah,
and I think that's the reason Cindy Lou can get through to him. I admire her tenacity.
yeah. She is,
If
very clearly just a good person throughout. As soon as the Grinch saves her life in, in the post office, she immediately sees there is, good in him. Although he was very willing to let her die, and Max would not let him leave.
yes,
So I think he fluked into it.
but then you sort of think, well, if Max is his conscience, then
Well, you're taking it very literally. That was Max physically stopping him.
yeah. Oh yeah, I mean, he bites his bum and pulls him back.
Yeah, yeah. Like that wasn't just
Um,
him talking to Max.
yeah, but I think there are glimpses of good
Oh no,
from the
100%.
Grinch
Yeah.
throughout the film, um, and obviously there's the whole thing about his heart being three sizes too small.
Yeah, I didn't enjoy how literally they took this. When he's like X-raying his heart and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's again, it's for a certain audience. I think, I think if I were to interpret it in any sort of way, it would obviously be that he struggles to kind of basically emotionally kind of deal with stuff.
Yeah,
He
yeah.
doesn't have that capacity.
And for me,
Um,
by taking it literally, it kind of removes from the kind of the poetic metaphor of the Zeus's work.
yeah, I understand that. I can see that, and I am inclined to agree. Um, I think, and I think there's at times maybe a tendency, and obviously that I assume that wasn't a choice that Jim Carrey made.
No, no, I think that would
Um,
come from Ron Howard and whoever else writes the
yeah,
script.
but I think the thing is I think actually what they would have potentially been looking at is also how, I mean, with somebody as niche as Jim Carrey in the role, looking at how they can write something and interpret a piece of writing in order to sort of maximize his sort of depiction of what is being written and what is being said.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think it's just as much to kind of feed Jim Carrey's specialty, or his ego, or whatever it may be that was going on behind the scenes. I think it was just as much about that as it was about a creative choice at that point.
Yeah, but I
For
think
things like that.
I think that occurs to the detriment of the film. Like we've talked about plenty of stuff I like, and yeah, this is one of the things that actually it's only like 3 or 4 moments in the film, but it bothered me because it spoke to me of they're trying to make a Jim Carrey film rather than a Doctor Seuss film. Like they don't
Yeah.
understand what makes Doctor Seuss special. They just know that Jim Carrey equals money.
Yeah. So, just a question for you then, in light of that. Do you think that if somebody else had played the Grinch, that would have improved the overall film?
It's hard because I think it really depends. It could have for me. Obviously, there's the fact that I'm just not a Jim Carrey fan.
Yeah.
But I definitely think that if you have just a more solid story around it that understands the kind of lyrical nature of Dr. Seuss's work, write the story. I think even with Jim Carrey, it can be better, and you can still have him, being wacky up in the cave and stuff like that. You don't need to go as hard into just this is a Jim Carrey movie.
Yeah. So you kind of think they tailored the direction around Jim Carrey a little too much?
Too much, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I think that that's probably just that's a product of his position in the industry at the time. Obviously,
Yeah,
he
yeah.
was booming and he had this clout, and again, he was very niche. Like they obviously, I guess, in choosing Jim Carrey, would have had to accept that it would have been a very stylized performance, and I guess there would have been maybe a slight disconnect, I guess, if they had kind of refused to mold the film around Jim Carrey's
Yeah, yeah.
performance,
And I mean,
especially if he is as stubborn as people have said.
yeah, and I mean, you look at kind of the other, I mentioned at the beginning, one of the conditions for, the right, being given the rights to the film was putting in a big name actor.
Yeah,
And, the ones that were kind of touted from that were Jack Nicholson, Jim Carrey, Robin Williams, Dustin Hoffman. And I think Nicholson, Carey, Williams all have a very particular style.
yeah. I mean, we've spoken about Jim Carrey kind of doing his more serious stuff. I would argue Robin Williams has that kind of stretch as well. I've seen a
Oh,
lot
yeah,
more
100%.
serious stuff from Robin Williams.
A Good Will
Um,
Hunting and,
one of my
Dead Poet
favorite films
Society.
ever. Yeah.
Incredible.
And then obviously you've got like the very kind of caricature stuff of like Flubber
And,
and
even things like
Aladdin.
Aladdin, yeah, yeah. The
Yeah.
one, the one for me that blends it so well is Good Morning Vietnam.
Okay, one I haven't seen.
It's it's superb.
Okay. Yeah, so that's one I need to see then on
Yeah,
my
yeah.
list. Um, Jack Nicholson, I haven't seen too many performances with Jack Nicholson. I've seen The Joker, I've seen him in The Shining and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Um, I kind of associate him with this sort of
Manic,
unhinged.
manic stuff. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
very manic. Yeah,
So I can see how he would very, very well portray the Grinch
and again, like
in
he,
this film.
yeah, and again, he obviously has like films where he's very much not in that kind of over the top style. Look at something like Chinatown, but again, if he was cast, they would probably play into that kind of manic, unhinged
Yeah,
Jack Nicholson role.
yeah. It would have been interesting to see Dustin Hoffman, I think,
Yeah, I
actually,
think he's
because
the most varied actor on the list.
yeah, I think he's maybe the least sort of
Pigeonholed.
pigeonholed in comedy, maybe.
Yeah, yeah, no, I think that's probably a better way of putting it for sure.
Yeah, I think it would have been interesting to see maybe his audition or something to kind of see.
Well, I don't even know if any of these, I don't know whether they auditioned. These were like the names that were.
Yeah,
You
true,
need someone
true.
of this level to
Yeah,
play the
yeah,
Grinch. Like that was one of the conditions of selling the film.
yeah,
Like it wasn't even at that point where anyone was auditioning.
yeah. I mean, I can't imagine him playing the Grinch,
Yeah,
but maybe that's because actually, kind of in light of well, obviously being written by Dr. Seuss and then having seen and being so familiar with Jim Carrey's version of the Grinch, I maybe see him being something that is kind of incredibly over the top
hmm.
and caricature.
Well,
Um,
Hoffman can do big performances as well.
yeah, I mean, I don't think I've seen enough of Hoffman to be able to say either way.
That's
Personally,
that's
I don't think I've seen
probably mean
enough of.
I haven't seen. He's probably the one I've seen least of on that kind of list. But
Yeah, yeah. I kind of think that's maybe a generational thing as well.
possibly.
Um,
Yeah, it's
I
it's
mean,
weird that he was listed as like one of these huge names in 2000, where I feel like
yeah,
he probably wasn't as big then.
yeah. I mean, I can't say because I wasn't into acting in the way that I am now in 2000. Well,
Yeah,
at all.
obviously.
But I knew about Jack Nicholson. I knew about Robin Williams. I knew about Jim Carrey. Even at that age, I'd seen them
Well, we
in
were
stuff.
probably in like the target audience for this film. Like our
Yeah,
generation
yeah,
adores this film, and there's a reason. We were the target audience. So
yeah,
Dustin Hoffman would have been a weird one because I don't think he resonates with our generation at all.
yeah. I mean, me being familiar with Jack Nicholson, I think was very much just. It was another full Monty moment where I'd probably seen films I shouldn't have done
But I
at that
mean,
age.
Batman. Like kids,
Yeah,
obviously loved Batman.
yeah. I get. Yeah, I guess I'd seen him as the Joker. So, um, but yeah, it's a very interesting lineup of people as kind of your potential options.
Yeah.
Um,
Have you got kind of any other thoughts on the film before we start wrapping up?
I mean, as I said, this for me, it's not necessarily about it being a brilliant film. I know that it's not kind of Oscar winning or Oscar worthy. I don't go into it going, "Oh, this changed my life," but I know that this will get me feeling Christmassy, and I kind of just use this to sort of like trigger my kind of Christmas season.
Okay.
Um, and yeah, I think you could try and analyze this film, and you could probably pick holes in it left, right, and center. And I think we kind of have done that, and
No, but
not in a negative way, but I think we've figured out where those gaps are.
yeah.
But for me, it's just kind of enjoying Christmas. It's just like you don't need to analyze it. You can kind of just enjoy it and for what it is. And yeah, I mean, I saw it in for this episode. I watched it in a cinema where I walked through like an immersive, snowy, sort of set into the cinema to watch it, and it kind of the whole experience was kind of revolved around me trying to kind of sparking the Christmas spirit. Maybe I was feeling more Christmassy than usual watching it this time round as well.
Yeah.
But that's kind of what I associate this film with more than anything else.
Yeah. So for me, it's always been kind of one where when it's on TV at Christmas, and it often is, I don't tend to watch it.
Yeah.
But actually watching it, this time for the podcast, it was nice to kind of go through and pick, I do like this about the film, I do like this about the film. Even if I don't like the film as a whole, it's certainly not one I hate. It's, it's just,
Yeah.
I'm not a huge fan. And
Yeah, I mean, I think that's just credit to us doing this podcast and approaching things with a more positive outlook.
And I think we picked out plenty of things that we can celebrate in the film. There's loads of great stuff in there.
Yeah,
and if you're a Jim Carrey fan, you'll love it.
Yeah, I mean, as we've said several times, he's a very stylized performer, in comedy anyway, at least, and this is very much a classic Jim Carrey performance. So if you're a fan, you won't. There's nothing that will make you not enjoy it.
So yeah, I'll wrap up with a little bit of post production. So
go for it.
When it came out, it performed really well at the box office. It made $350 million. It had the highest opening weekend for any Christmas themed film until the 2018 version of The Grinch came and beat it.
Oh, okay.
And it was the sixth highest grossing film of 2000, so performed really well. But the critical response wasn't so favourable.
Yeah, I can imagine.
It is the worst reviewed film we have done on the podcast. It
really?
holds a 49% approval rating on Rotten Tomatoes. I've just looked it up. Star Wars is at 53%. I believe Star Wars also has a slightly higher average rating. This is at like 5.5. That's at like 5.9. So, yeah, it's officially the worst reviewed film we've done on the podcast. But all the reviews praised Jim Carrey. Like that was the general kind of reaction to the film. Is Carrey's great, the film not so much.
Yeah. I think I need to reevaluate the standard of the films I'm bringing to the table here.
You have brought, I think, the only two negatively reviewed ones. But yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm here for Star Wars.
Always.
You said this isn't necessarily an Oscar-winning film, but it did win an Oscar for Best Makeup.
Yeah, okay.
And it was also nominated for Best Art Direction and Best Costume Design. Carey was also nominated for Best Actor in a Musical or Comedy at the Golden Globes.
Yeah.
On the flip side, do you know the Razzies?
I do, yeah. Raspberries.
I think they're stupid, but it was nominated for 2 Razzies. It was nominated for
Worst
Worst
Sequel. It's a bit
Sequel.
of fun, isn't it?
Yeah, it was nominated for Worst Remake or Sequel, and it was nominated for Worst Screenplay. It lost the remake or sequel to the second Blair Witch, Book of Shadows.
And I don't know if I've seen that.
I don't think you need to. And it lost Worst Screenplay to Battlefield Earth, which I believe was the big winner that year at the Razzies.
Right, okay. That's one I definitely haven't seen, sorry. And I'm definitely not
I'm avoiding that like the plague.
I think maybe we should do like a whole season where we go through films that have won the Razzies.
I can't imagine anything worse. I'd really rather not.
All right. Yeah, I mean, I haven't got much more to say about this film.
Yeah. I think that's probably good. And before we wrap up, I've got a quick outro.
Yeah, go for it.
So, 2020, obviously, it's been a weird year. It's been a difficult year.
Oh, it has.
One of the big things that's kind of helped get me through it has been media. So, films, TV shows, video games.
Yeah.
I want to talk about kind of my favourites of the year in each of those categories.
Okay.
Hop on if you have any ideas. I haven't told you I was going to do this, so you obviously haven't prepared.
No, that's fine.
I've
got some ideas in my head already.
Great.
So.
I'll start with films because we are a film podcast. So I'm not going to include like the Oscar-nominated films from last year that got released this year in the UK.
Yeah.
So ignoring those, I think my favourite film of the year is a film called Palm Springs, which was a rom-com with Andy Samberg.
Okay, I haven't seen it.
Yeah, no, it didn't get huge amounts of press, but definitely one I recommend people checking out. There's a film called Weathering with You, which is a Japanese anime film by the guy who created Your Name, which is one of my all-time favourites.
Okay.
There is a really messed up horror film called Possessor by David Cronenberg's son.
Okay.
That was an experience I highly recommend if you're into horror. And one from 2 days ago, as of time of recording, I just saw Wonder Woman 1984.
Yes, I'm looking forward to seeing this because I saw you kind of post about that.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I think Patty Jenkins is pretty much single-handedly, smashing the films in the DC universe.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. I mean, I have some films that I'm not too clued up on what's been released recently, but the films that I've watched this year that I've enjoyed the most, I think that I've watched for the first time, one of them has got to be one actually that you introduced me to, not on the podcast, and it's Train to Busan, which
Great
is
film.
A Korean horror film, zombie horror film.
Yeah, there was a sequel this year actually, which I haven't yet seen, called Peninsula. I believe it's very different, got reviewed worse, but I think it's sort of its own beast.
Okay, yeah. This film might pop up at some point. It's, just a brilliant blend of kind of horror, action, and
social
just
commentary
with some really social commentary and heartfelt moments in it. I mean, it's a good one. It's a really good film. And the depiction of, I think the depiction of zombies can be a very varied one and very kind of subjective. But for me, this kind of, it's quite realistic. I guess if something like that were to happen, this is what I'd imagine would be the kind of realism of it, the reality of it. So that for me is probably one of my standout films of the year. Obviously, it wasn't released this year, but it's one that I watched for the first time this year.
Cool.
And thank you for recommending it to me and actually getting me the DVD.
Yeah. In terms of, I'll talk about video games very briefly because there's two I think
Yep.
I need to touch on.
Okay.
First was as the pandemic hit, kind of the early thing that got a lot of people through was Animal Crossing. So shout out to
Uh-huh.
Animal Crossing. I know some people who still play it. I played it for about a month. It was a great distraction.
Oh, I know what's coming.
You know what's coming.
Gosh.
The obsession for the last 3 to 4 months has been Among Us. I adore this game. I watch so much content of this game. It is so much fun to play. Like we have a group of regulars. We don't sadly get up to the full 10 a lot. When
Yeah.
we do, it's amazing, and I
I've
highly
hopped on a couple
recommend
of
Among Us
times.
if you haven't.
Yeah, it's been fun. I've enjoyed playing it. It's a lot more fun when you're playing with friends that you know.
Yeah, and I definitely joke around in there a lot more than we did at the start as well. Like, we
Yeah.
definitely troll people in there quite a bit now.
I actually looked at the growth of like the kind of user base,
Yeah,
and it is incredible to see how much it boomed over the last sort of 2 years
yeah.
or year or so. Yeah. So yeah, you've not stopped talking about it. So
I'm obsessed.
For me, there was a game that came out. I have a PS4. There was a game that came out at the beginning of the first pandemic, towards the beginning of the first pandemic, and it was The Last of Us Part 2.
I sadly haven't played it yet. I know it's
I
won a
will-
ton of Game of the Year stuff.
Yeah, I've got both of them, so I can lend them to you should you want to play them.
I played the first one. The first one is
Okay.
incredible.
It is brilliant, and it's actually one of my favourite games I've ever played.
That's
On
fair.
PS4. But The Last of Us Part 2, for me this year, I mean, I associate my first lockdown with completing that game as quickly as I could.
Yeah.
It's a lot. It's very much based on the storyline, more so than last time, I think. As in terms of the relationships within the story, it was contested quite a lot by sort of real intense gamers. There are a couple of twists and turns which they weren't fans of. I quite liked it.
I've managed to avoid all spoilers.
Okay, so I won't say anything.
Yeah.
But it's got a good amount of the other thing I like about it is it's actually got a good amount of game time. One thing I really struggle with is I mean I got the Call of Duty Modern Warfare, and there was like 7 hours game time because it's all gone online now.
Yeah.
So I liked that I could kind of play this single player sort of prestige like storyline, which was nice, and it gives you a good number of hours. So yeah, that for me, and obviously post-apocalyptic zombie game in the middle of a pandemic feels appropriate.
I wonder
So
what your
yeah,
zombie
that one.
themed TV show is going to be.
Oh, is that
Well, you've
another
been
one
on
that-
zombie theme so far.
Oh yeah, I have as well, haven't I?
Yeah.
Oh
So
yeah. No, actually, I've got a different TV show.
that's cool.
so-
My quick rundown of TV shows. I've got several different categories here because obviously TV is so widely all encompassing.
Yeah.
Firstly, sort of new TV shows. The Queen's Gambit, I loved. I thought that was a really,
Brilliant.
really good show.
Yeah.
And then I May Destroy You, which I may have called the best British TV show ever made in terms of like of drama quality.
Yeah. I'm not sure. I haven't seen that yet.
It's phenomenal. It's trigger warning if you're going into it for content on kind of rape and sexual assault, but it deals with that in such incredible fashion. It manages to be funny and talks about these really difficult and important issues in such a brilliant way. It was genuinely a phenomenal experience.
Yeah.
In terms of sort of continuing TV shows, The Boys, it doesn't have a lot of subtlety, but it's very entertaining, and its political message is, it hits you on the head with it a little bit, but it's still right on.
I'm currently watching season 1.
Okay.
I'm towards the end of season 1, so no spoilers, please.
Well, I mean, just even in like season 1, you've got this representation of America being a megalomaniac, sort of I can't say that word. megalomaniac, um, all controlling, all powerful
Yeah.
bad guy. It's not
Yeah.
subtle.
Yeah. No.
And it goes to even less subtle places in season 2.
I can imagine.
I want to shout
Yeah.
out Sex Education, one of the most funny
Yeah.
shows. I wish we had a show like this when we were sort of young teens. Like, I think anyone sort of going through puberty should watch this show. And season 2 just finished today. It was such a good finale. The Mandalorian.
Oh, so you're. Oh, okay. Yeah, I was gonna say you're catching up on Sex Education, but you're talking about Mandalorian.
Yeah, Mandalorian.
Yeah.
Something happened in the finale. I won't spoil it for people. It was rad. It was so good.
Okay. For me, one TV series that really stands out is The Money Heist.
Okay,
Is Money Heist
Spanish
for
show,
me.
right? Yeah.
Spanish show got picked up, I think, after the first season on Netflix or the second season.
Yeah, I've seen.
They
it on
weren't
Netflix,
sure
I'm not
whether
sure.
they were going to carry on, and then Netflix picked it up, and a fourth season has been announced or confirmed by Netflix. Shug, I don't know if you've seen it.
Nope.
You should.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
absolutely
much to watch.
fantastic. The characters are brilliant. The relationships are brilliant. The storyline is brilliant. You find yourself rooting for people that you're not sure you should be rooting for. And I mean, I think politically, I can kind of understand where the show is coming from.
Okay.
I can't really give much more away
No,
than
yeah,
that.
that's
That
fine.
sounds pretty vague. But the acting is brilliant. It's just an absolutely fantastic show. For me, I wasn't sure if I'd like it, and I was hooked after the first or second episode. Another one that has recently just released a new season, which for me just brings a bit of lightheartedness. It's an easy watch. Is Big Mouth,
Really good
season
show.
4.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just fun. It's fun. It's funny. It's lighthearted, but also talks about really important points.
Much like Sex Education.
Yeah, yeah. I'd argue possibly more crude than Sex Education,
Yeah.
and a little bit more literal than Sex Education. But yeah, it really kind of explores the sort of anxieties, quite literally, of young kids and
Yeah, yeah.
young teenagers, people kind of going through puberty and the experiences that they have, and in cartoon fashion.
Yeah.
So yeah, those two for me are the two kind of TV seasons that I've really enjoyed watching over the course of this year.
Yeah, and the last thing I want to do is shout out a few shows that ended this year. It's actually
Yep.
3 animated shows, all very, very different. Firstly, Star Wars: The Clone Wars ended for the 3rd time. They kept bringing it back.
Okay.
That show, like, it started really for kids, and it built into some of the best storytelling Star Wars ever done.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so good. I think She-Ra and the Princesses of Power, which is on Netflix. It is a phenomenal show. Obviously, again, designed for kids, but it's accessible for anyone. It's so good. And finally, the show that I think probably is my favourite show of the 2010s, possibly the best show of the 2010s, BoJack Horseman finished this year, and
Oh, okay.
that show is just genius on so many levels. So funny, so smart, so cutting in its sort of view on society. And
Yeah.
I know some people that I know were underwhelmed with the finale. I thought it was a perfect finale for the show, as
Yeah.
it just kind of it delves into the experience of kind of trauma and depression and attempts to rebuild from that.
Yeah, I'd also like to give a quick shout out to a series that I know that we've both watched that has finished this year in Schitt's Creek.
Very funny, and
I think we spoke about this last week as well.
a really good one to watch if you just need something to stick on and make you
Yeah.
happy.
Yeah, it's it's just an easy watch, a nice easy watch. You could even have it in the background, but yeah, it's that's another one that I know you enjoyed as well.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I
for
thought I'd
sure.
throw that one in there.
Very good. Yeah, and that sort of does it for this week's episode. And next week we are going to have kind of a special end of season episode. So we decided to, have like a 3-month hiatus, maybe record some episodes so we're less time pressured, and we're going to have a sort of wrap up awards show for the season we've just done.
Yes,
Is
looking forward to it.
Yeah, there's going to be some like silly awards. There's going to be some, more legitimate awards, and I think that'll be a fun time. It'll probably be a bit shorter than the regular episode, but it should be a good one.
Yeah, it'll be nice to just kind of have a quick look over what we've spoken about and, look back on our first season of Nostalgia Bubble.
I may have spent 20 minutes discussing with one of our friends what's a better quote from Star Wars or Shrek.
Right, okay. You're going to have to quote both next week, though.
I will.
It
It was a hard decision. And
Okay.
yeah, that'll do it for today. And you can find the podcast on iTunes, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Podbean, and on YouTube. You can follow us at Nostalgia Bubble on Twitter and at Nostalgia Bubble Podcast on Facebook and Instagram. You can follow me at Shuggy Says, that's SHUGGIE Says, on all social media platforms. And night.
And you can follow me on Twitter at Nyrees, so NYEREES, or on Instagram at ReeseNye, so REESNYE.
And we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.